What's going on, you sons of bitches? Jordon Martell here. You are listening to the Martell Effect podcast. Coming off a year-long hiatus. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to how life kind of gets in the way of shit sometimes. But I figured it was about time to get the ball rolling again. Personally, I didn't like how I left the podcast last time. Statistically, 70% or higher. I think it might be higher now. Of all podcasts fail within 7 episodes, and I hadn't even gotten to that yet. And I've never really been one to quit on anything. Typically, my circumstances have to force me to quit. And this time around, I have to be very honest. Was not my circumstances, I probably could have done a lot more to get this done. I can blame it on mental health all I want. I could create excuses all day long, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to blame it on being lazy and unmotivated. And there's really no excuse for that shit. I pretty much gave up before I really got started, and that didn't sit right with me. I'm sure everybody can relate to doing that to at least one thing in their life. It's like how Steven Pressfield talks about in The War of Art. Great book if you're an artist. There's the life that we live, and then there's the life that we choose not to. Or the person doesn't realize or end up living up to their potential because they're too afraid to venture into the unknown. Then next thing you know, they're on their deathbed wondering what if. And me personally, I don't care to be one of those people. I want to be on my deathbed happy with everything that I've done and all that I've accomplished. And I never under any circumstance want to be the person to ask myself the 2 words, what if, when that time comes. So without further ado, I bring you the resurrection of the Martell Effect podcast. For those of you who know nothing about me, I'm a 26-year-old artist out of Connecticut. I use the broad term artist because I like to dabble in a little bit of everything. Although I'd have to say my primary love at this very moment is mixed martial arts. Huge MMA fan. I'm a pretty big sports fan in general. My second would probably have to be football, though, because you gotta have a respect for the guys that put their bodies on the line. I hear it too often that they say football players are overpaid. That's horseshit because at the end of the day, store clerk Steve is not putting his body through the same punishment, the same abuse. He's not taking brain damage, all for the entertainment of people that they're never going to meet in their life, or could care less about how their lives go after they retire. The vast majority, anyway. That's why I got so much appreciation for people that do combat sports. As we were just talking about unrealized potential, combat sports makes you realize that potential, whether or not you think you can get to a certain point or not. It brings you to a point that you might not have thought you could get to before. For example, Khalil Rountree, who just fought this past weekend, was 350 pounds, sitting on his couch, chain smoking cigarettes. Found MMA, and now he's an athlete on fucking ESPN, which is probably the last channel he thought he'd ever appear on. So when people say it's barbaric, it's violent, it serves no purpose in modern society, I beg to differ. Because you got guys like Shane Strickland who openly admits he'd be dealing meth in a fucking trailer somewhere if he didn't have MMA. The Black Beast, Derek Lewis, was a felon before this. There's not a lot of opportunities for felons. Fortunately enough for him, it's almost a resume booster for the UFC. Daniel Rodriguez, same case, was a felon. Now he pays his fucking bills. Now he doesn't have to go to a life of crime. The general public's a little bit safer at night. And all in all, it teaches a lot of life skills. If a guy can work up to his black belt, it teaches him how to stick with shit, not to give up on something prematurely. Realize his potential and what he's capable of, even in times where he doesn't think he can do certain things. It gives insecure people confidence in themselves so they don't have to say go for a gun, which is why you see a lot of these police forces implementing that into their training, making it so they have to be a blue belt at least in order to be on the force, which I think would be a great requirement anyway. Because a lot of these guys really can't defend themselves if it comes down to a situation. So them being able to know how to manipulate, close, feel more comfortable in a hand-to-hand combat situation, again, so they don't have to lean towards the gun and we get a lot less of these police shootings. Women's self-defense. For example, you got Paulina Vieja, I want to say her name is, who was a Brazilian native. A guy tried to rob her in the streets of Brazil, and homeboy got his ass kicked. Now, if martial arts was not a thing, do you think that would have been a viable option for her under any other circumstance? Especially when the dude's got a knife? No. And do you think those methods of defending herself in a hostile situation would be there if the UFC was not developed? Probably not. So to say it doesn't serve a purpose because people think it's violent, it's brutal, it is these things, but these people willingly and voluntarily sign up for this. They could pick any other job and potentially make more money, more than likely even, but they still sign up anyway, and they know the risk of this. Offer an opportunity to do what? Realize their potential. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I'd rather get punched in the face than punch a clock any day. Now, unfortunately, due to my current circumstances, I'm sidelined at the moment. My ambition is to one day start fighting professionally. However, due to a head injury I sustained a couple years ago, I've been sidelined for about a year. The injury was actually not training related. I'll get to that in a second. But due to certain circumstances, I was not able to go to the hospital when I first sustained this injury. About 6 years or so, when I was 21, I had a brief stint as a independent street pharmacist, let's just say. There was this chick I was talking to for give or take a year. Asked me if I could bring over 2 ounces of weed for her brother and her roommate. Didn't really think a whole lot of it because up to that point, I hadn't really had any issues with people that I knew of anyway, apparently. I like to keep all my relationships, personal and professional, on good terms. Always have. But anyway, I go about my day. I get what I have to get. Picked up about a quarter pound from who I was going to at the time. One of my homies ended up coming through. We chilled for a little bit. Went over to one of my other homies' cribs because it was right around the block to where I had to drop off. We chilled there for maybe another 3 hours. Come to find out down the line, he might have played a little bit of a part in what was about to happen to me. We'll talk about that another time, though, for time's sake. But shortly as we're about to go, my homie asked me if he could borrow my knife. When he explained it to me kinda under peculiar circumstances, something about he was going to his girlfriend's family event and her cousin that molested her was gonna be there, some strange shit like that. But it's my homie. He has had no reason to lie to me up to that point, so I say why not? I give it to him because of course I'm going to a place that I think I'm straight. So hand it over to him, dumbass. So me and my other boy swing over to where I gotta go. He smoked so much weed that he slumped out in the back seat. Again, another dumbass move. Shoulda woke his ass up. Told him I was gonna be back in a minute. Left him be in the whip. Went over to go meet her brother. We bullshit for like about 2 seconds, whatever. Hi, how you doing? Have you talked to my sister yet today? Yada yada yada. It's a sectioned off house. They lived on the bottom floor. I walked through the door. The first thing I noticed was that all their furniture had been spread out. Coffee table had been moved. But up to every single time I had been to that house at that point, all the furniture was moved regardless. Different layout, everything. But before I could fully connect the dots, next thing I know, I'm getting beat over the head with a frying pan. Back of my head, left side of my head, I got my hands up. Just trying to defend at this point because I'm fucking still trying to process what's happening. The only reason I'm still probably alive today from that incident is because by some strange miracle, the skillet actually broke and detached from the handle. But at this point, I'm basically out on my feet. How I'm still standing, I can't even begin to tell you at this point. But while I'm basically on my feet groggy, one of them slaps a rear naked choke on me. At this point in time, I'm not training at all. So an escape's out of the question. So I accept defeat. I let them take what's in my pockets. They were kind enough to leave my shoes. Probably because it wasn't their size. Who knows? But after they took everything in my pockets except my cell phone, they threw that on the couch. They ran for the hills and locked their door. At this point, I'm actually surprisingly fairly lucid. Probably because of the adrenaline. But I run to my car. Meet my boy. We go back to my other homie's crib. I try to get what I had to get. Because I was planning on going back to the house and doing some irreparable damage. But my homie wouldn't give me back my knife and a couple other supplies that I needed. If that wasn't another red flag added onto it. But at this point, whatever. He let me clean up. I cooled off in that period of time. I took my L. But ever since then, I'm sure anybody that's had a traumatic brain injury can attest to. Since then, I've had bouts with depression, suicide, headaches. More times than not, it felt like a sea urchin was sprouting out of my head. If you really want to get into specifics, I'm not sure if that's what it was like with everybody else. But for me, that's what it was. Bouts with paranoia and PTSD. I began to cut out the vast majority of people in my life because I thought everyone was out to get me. Which I can tell you firsthand, PTSD or not, really no way to live. Because people really need that type of connection with people. I've been fortunate enough to have a couple of my uncles to lean on, especially now more recently. But if any of y'all had an incident that's similar to this in any way, shape, or form, I advise you to still pursue a connection with people. Otherwise, it's going to be like solitary confinement in prison, no different. The only difference is you can leave anytime you want. The problem is you're not going to want to because you think everyone is out to hurt you. Which is why I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have this social interaction. And have people around you that you can subside in and that you can trust. Because without without that, you're going to be hostile to everybody. You're going to be antisocial. And that's how sociopaths are made. Where everything around you doesn't particularly matter, and you're more worried about your self-preservation. Which is part of the reason I took up MMA in the first place. I wanted to ensure that that was never going to happen to me again. And along the way, I made connections with some of my teammates. Began to make friends again. This is at Fighting Arts Academy in New Haven. But in a time of my life where my entire world around me was chaos, my home living was hell, my job was hell. I was a casino dealer for give or take 4 years. And let me tell you something, gambling can bring out the worst in people. You will see the worst side of people at a blackjack table. You could have known that person your entire life. You could have been great friends with them, known them your whole life, but a side to them will appear that you did not know existed at a blackjack table. People become ruthless, nasty. I've had people ask me what kind of bag they want to put over my head, paper or plastic. I've had people who've lost large increments of money wait for me in the parking lot. So you earn what you're paid. Like, it's not like these guys are just fucking playing games all day or whatever and getting large sums of money. Nah, they deal with a lot of bullshit. It could get very draining at times. So my home life shit, my work life's hell. All I want is a place where I can feel at peace for even 3 hours a day. And mixed martial arts supplied that for me. Which is actually kind of ironic if you think about it, because out of all those predicaments, out of all those situations, fighters are the people that can hurt you the worst. But they're not like that. Because a lot of them blow off the steam in the gym, they tend to not be as aggressive walking out. Because they know what they're capable of, they don't feel the need to display it in public. So Fighting Arts Academy really gave me a home when I felt like I didn't have one. So in the beginning, I was obsessed. I was going damn near every single day. And of course, as time goes on, life tries to change your plans a little bit. And although the psychological part was pretty much dissipating by this point, but the physical was still very much there. The headaches and migraines were getting more and more frequent. Even now, I have trouble laying on my right side because it puts too much pressure on my head, which then induces the migraines, which then induces me vomiting at night, almost like clockwork. So finally, I decided to make an appointment with a neurologist. That was about a year ago. They're booked up the ass, so I'm actually going in April to get that squared away finally. Hopefully a lot of it's psychological and that it's just all in my head. That's the best case scenario, but I feel like it wouldn't be doing myself a service jumping right into the fight game when I have God knows what's wrong with me. Especially when a kid from this past weekend at Ammo Fight League at the Big E Center, that's in Springfield, passed away in his first ever MMA bout when he suffered a third round TKO loss, and he was just 27 himself. That's only a year older than me. And not only am I doing myself a disservice by throwing myself in there possibly as a fucking suicide mission, but it doesn't reflect good on my coaches or my teammate because they let me get in there. Then their reputation's fuck. Well, why'd you let this kid get in there? Now parents don't want their kids to train there because they think the owner's reckless. They think he only cares about himself and his notoriety for the gym. A lot of bad shit could happen. So for the time being, I'm venturing in other mediums of art at the moment because I like to dabble in pretty much everything. Writing, drawing, painting, music, which I would say probably has to be one of my biggest flaws, if I'd have to say. Just because by me doing that, I stretch myself so thin that it's hard for me to get good at one specific thing. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Malcolm Gladwell's The 10,000 Hours, or The Outlier actually, but it's got the 10,000 hour rule in it. But essentially what the 10,000 hour rule is, that whether it be whatever your craft is, could be basketball, football, writing, painting, spray painting, tattooing, etc., etc. You can go down the list all fucking day. No, I kind of find that number to be fairly arbitrary because there's a lot of people that can pick shit up a lot quicker than others, and there's some people that need more time than others. You got people that play basketball their entire life from the time they are children, and they never get a shot at pro ball. And then you get guys like Joel Embiid that lived in Africa their entire life, gets discovered by the right person, gets a shot to come over to the U.S. and learn how to play basketball. I think he played maybe 3 years in high school or whatever. Never touched a basketball prior to that, and eventually makes the NBA. Francis Ngannou, the heavyweight champ at the UFC, same exact shit. Was a poor kid mining sand in Cameroon for $2 a day. Decided that wasn't the life he wanted for himself. Figured there had to be better things in life. Ventured off, was homeless in France for a while, picked up MMA, initially was going to pick up boxing. I believe 24 years of age, some shit like that. Fast forward 7-8 years later, and out of 9 billion people, if you lock him in a room with any one of them, he's probably the one walking out. And there are people that might not catch on quite as quick. They might have obstacles other people don't. Like, for example, one of my MMA coaches when I was training at Fighting Arts Academy in New Milford, Nick Newell, a lot of people might have heard of him. He currently fights for Bellator, has fought for the PFL, has had a shot at fighting in the UFC on the Contender Series. I believe he's 17-4, 17-3, one of those. Now, a good chunk you might be saying, Jordan, these are impressive accolades and all, but what about these accolades set him apart from everybody else? Well, when you find out he did it all with one fucking hand, it tends to make it all the more impressive. And as one could guess, MMA and combat sports didn't particularly come natural to him. In his first wrestling season, I believe, I'll say it was his sophomore year of high school, went 0-17 for his entire first year of wrestling. Fast forward 2 or 3 years down the line, and he's wrestling for Division II, I want to say. Whatever Western New England University is. But point of the matter being, if somebody from present day were to travel back in time to when he was first born, and this dude tries telling his parents that their son is one day going to be a world-class fighter, odds are probably not going to be received too well. I can tell you if it was my son and some dude walked in trying to spew the same exact shit, they're like, okay, asshole. And what, I suppose you're going to tell me to buy Bitcoin because it's the future too? Right, point of the matter of speaking is, sometimes it's really hard and it takes a really long time for people to obtain their gift. More often than not, it's going to take people 5, 6, 7, 10 years to achieve any type of success in whatever they're doing. Point being with Nick, at any point during his career, he could have gave up, one could say justifiably, because closed-minded and short-minded people don't expect much out of a guy with a genetic defect, and very easily could have fell in the box that people wanted to put him in. And been like, oh, well, I guess this defect is a little bit too much to overcome. Maybe people were right about this. Maybe athletics aren't my thing. Maybe I should try something else. But rather than conforming to the negativity around him, he decided, fuck that. Whether people believe it or not, I know I'm cut out for this shit. And I'm going to stick with it, no matter how long this shit takes. And if you think about it, that's really what creates the difference between a Jordon Martell and a Nick Newell. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, I like to experiment and dabble in pretty much every medium. But at the end of the day, I'm not exceptional at any particular one, I'll be the first to admit. As for Nick Newell doesn't do anything other than mixed martial arts. He's not painting on the side, he's not creating a mixtape. He's dedicated his entire life to MMA, and that's the reason he's been so successful at what he does. Same goes for Francis. Francis wasn't pursuing a professional basketball career or a professional rugby career on top of MMA or boxing. He stuck with it until it got him out of the trenches. Now he's undeniably probably the baddest man on the planet. And now that he's at a crossroads, because you never know what the hell is going to particularly happen with this UFC issue. Of course, now he has his knee surgery to deal with. But he's, of course, still in negotiations with Dana. Dana, of course, being a greedy penny pinching bitch. Which leaves him
to go down one of two paths. He could re-sign with the UFC and be the reason that fighters get paid as well as football or basketball players, which would be absolutely monumental and bigger than anything he's done in the sport. Or because the UFC doesn't want to pay him and create that enormous gap in between pay, then he's a free man. He can opt out, do whatever the fuck he decides. He can do movies. He can go jump the entire line in the entire heavyweight boxing division and fight Tyson Fury. He can create his own brand and own business depending on what he decides to venture in. But point of the matter is, he wouldn't have all these different avenues if he didn't become exceptionally good and scary at MMA. He had to become phenomenal at one area before he could branch off into others, which is way easier said than done because our animal instincts want us to avert risk at all costs. And put in literally all your time into one thing, no matter what it is, whatever you're passionate about, 9 times out of 10 isn't a conventional method of making a living. And even if it is, I have a friend that I went to high school with and played football with that is going to be an anesthesiologist, which requires 12 years of schooling, which is a discipline in its own right and very costly, especially if he's not able to get a job afterwards. Might not even be passionate about it by the time he's done or even want to do it. Now he's stuck with all this debt. Going on 30, has no idea what the fuck he wants to do. And now he's back at square one. But the fact of the matter is that risk is going to be there no matter what you venture in life. It's only a matter of how far you're willing to fall if you fail. Because you can scrape by with minimum wage jobs and all this low paying shit, not put a whole lot of effort into it, maybe eventually get fired from it. Because oftentimes minimal pay equals minimum motivation. And if people are getting minimum wage, they're not really willing to go the extra mile because at the end of the day, they can work their ass off. They can be really good at what they do. Exceptionally even. But no matter how good they are, no matter how world-class they might be at what they do, they're still getting the same shit. They're barely making ends meet. So why are they going to kill themselves, exerting themselves for a boss that's unappreciative, that's literally getting rich, eating off of that person's back, and they might not even be putting the same amount of effort. And because that boss is lazy and doesn't put in the same amount of effort, and the employee's literally busting his ass, probably knows the job better than his boss, but for that reason, the boss isn't willing to promote the employee, because by doing that, that then threatens the boss, because then the boss's boss recognizes the other guy's effort and realizes, well, if he's doing all of this for us, then what the fuck do we need you for? Now your boss registers you as a threat, so now he's not going to put you in a position to succeed. Might even attempt to sabotage you in some ways, just make sure that you stay at the low end of the totem pole. So now one has to ask the question, is going the extra mile worth going for anymore? Is it an outdated concept? My grandfather, very skilled man, worked with his hands his entire life. Could do just about anything with his hands, carpentry, plumbing, electricity. Had his own business, but eventually it went down under. Switched over to the casino, they paid him decent. Balanced 2 or 3 jobs most of his life, most of which never really paid him the value that he was truly worth. There was a time I was just out of high school, I think I was in college at the time. Me and him were both working at this little private club. I'm not going to say the name of it, it's almost out of business probably now anyway. But they had him do everything under the sun, you name it. Plumbing, he was their maintenance guy, he was a houseman for the convention hall. At a point in time, he was even their bartender. And pretty much never got paid anything more than minimum wage for that job. And these are all skills that some people get paid, well, now it's a little different, but at that time, probably $20, which would probably equate to $25, $27 at this point. Whereas the heroin addict dishwasher was making $4 an hour more than him. And on top of that, he was stealing from the register. They actually, as a measure to keep him employed there,
locked up everybody's checks so he didn't steal them. Yet they put that man's value over what my grandfather was producing, which was 3 or 4 skills in one position. So I grew up, and he's had this job actually a lot longer until I even got there, because he actually taught me the value of hard work from that job, because I was working there from like 10 years old up. I'd make $20 each time I went, and I thought I was stacking back then. And I was doing this with him every single weekend, and at 10 years old, kids ain't making $20. Maybe now with NFTs and all this other shit, I mean, times are changing. I'm honestly turning an old man my damn self. Definitely look at it anyway. But point of the matter being is, I watched this place slave my grandfather out. Eventually, we did quit. But a vast majority of his life was like that. He worked his ass off, worked. And at the end of the day, where he's at right now, he still can't retire, at least comfortably anyway. Especially with my grandma recently passing in February. Now he's forced to take on the bulk of the bills himself. He's still got a good chunk of change left on his mortgage. He also made the unfortunate mistake of signing on to 2 of my cousin's student loans, to which he does not pay a fucking cent for. I don't know what con artist convinced a generous man that no good deed goes unpunished, but that motherfucker deserves to get kicked in his scrotum, because my grandfather had the kindness of his heart could not have got fucked over worse. So at 80 years old, this man's potentially going to work himself straight into the ground with almost nothing to show for it. Because at the end of the day, the only person that's going to appreciate your hard work and you going the extra mile is yourself. Because at the end of the day, your boss can butter you up, say how much he appreciates your hard work, how much he appreciates having you around. At the end of the day, he only says that because you're doing him a service. The moment you're no longer useful or you can no longer do your job effectively, they'll toss you out like yesterday's garbage because you're no longer any good to them. Perfect example, Stephen Bonner right now. For those of you who do not know who that is, he's basically one of 2-3 reasons why the UFC is still around today. He was on the initial cast, The Ultimate Fighter, for the season 1. Made it all the way to the finale, fought Forrest Griffin in what potentially could be the most significant, if not one of the best fights of all time. Because if that fight goes in any other way, shape, or form other than the slugfest that it was, then the UFC might not be around today. So one could potentially say that he saved the company. He's the reason Dana White's a billionaire. He's the reason that the Fertittas are so successful. One of the reasons they were successful before that. But they would have lost, give or take, $44 million if that season of The Ultimate Fighter flopped. So one could say the Fertittas and Dana White owe the world to Stephen Bonner, the world to Forrest Griffin, Diego Sanchez. Those guys should never have to pay another bill in their fucking life for what they gave to that company. Fast forward 17 years, Stephen Bonner's house just burned down a couple weeks ago. The man lost literally everything he owned. Yet, did Dana come to his aid? Did the Fertittas come to his aid? Be like, yo, man, you've done so much for us. We're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure that your family's good. Instead, Stephen Bonner's family is forced to make a fucking GoFundMe page to where if it wasn't for Tyron Woodley speaking out to the UFC fan base on social media about it, on top of giving a generous $5,000 donation, Stephen and his family would probably be eating out of a fucking soup kitchen today. The man's going through arguably some of the hardest trials and tribulations of his life to date. Yeah, we're the people that he helped when they were going through struggles, when they were going through tough times. When Dana White was about to be homeless eating out of a fucking soup kitchen. The man now is worth a couple $100 million. The man's willing to bet, give or take, $1 million on the fucking blackjack table. Yet this man literally can't find it in himself to quit gambling maybe one night just to help his fighter that saved his company from bottoming out. Same exact shit with Diego Sanchez. Granted, he got $250,000 when he was released,
full fight pay and everything. But Dana White in an interview said, Diego, if you need anything, call me. Dana White didn't say he would answer the phone if Diego called him. He left that part specifically out. And Diego made sure to mention that when he was interviewed and asked about it. And this is a man that was with the company, give or take, for, again, 17 years. He just retired. Actually, he didn't even retire. He just fought for Eagle FC against Kevin Lee. So here's a guy pushing 40, still having a fight, and at a time when he should be kicking his feet up, relaxing, or moving on to the next phase of his life in some kind of business venture or what have you. But instead, here he is, still slinging leather because the boss that he literally gave parts of to satisfy, literally pieces of his well-being, his mind, body, and soul, to make sure that he put on a good show for his boss, his fans. But at the end of the day, what does Diego Sanchez have to show for it? He's got no permanent health care. He's got no passive source of income. Meanwhile, the UFC is still making money off of both of those guys, Diego Sanchez and Stephan Bonner, because of UFC Fight Pass. Fans rerun fights all the fucking time. Those are classic fights. Diego Sanchez and Clay Guida, Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin. I keep repeating it. Fans are going to watch these fights from years to come. Yeah, who's making money off of it? Dana White, Hunter Campbell, Sean Shelby. Guys that aren't actually sacrificing themselves. They're just profiting off of the bloodshed and the harm of competitors that are actually willing to get in there, put their body on the line, sacrifice everything they have for a boss that's not going to remember you in give or take 3 or 5 years. That's why I can't stress enough the importance to those that are listening to treat yourselves with the utmost care and to run yourself as if you were your own business. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one that's going to cherish the 10,000 hours that you put into whatever your craft is. And only you are going to reward yourself accordingly. Your talents and abilities could be worth millions and millions. But at the end of the day, a business owner isn't going to offer you what you're worth. He's going to offer you what he thinks he can get away with paying you without you causing too much of a fuss. And the unfortunate catch to that is you might need their approval to get to where you want to be. Because not everybody's trying to work for themselves or own their own business. They're just trying to make a decent living and live the best way they can comfortably. So you might be somebody that's just trying to simply move up in a position or get a promotion, what have you. But same rules apply. You got to be willing to up and leave if you know what your worth is. If you think you're supplying too much for too little pay, it's the same thing as any other contract negotiation. You got to be willing to put your foot down, being like, I'm worth more than this. If you don't supply it, then I have to take my talents elsewhere. Which is one positive takeaway from this pandemic. A lot of people are up and leaving their jobs, which is opening up a lot of employment opportunities for a lot of different people, making it pretty much so that the power is back in the employees' hands rather than the employers, because now there's no scarcity in jobs. People aren't forced to keep the shit that they don't like, because if they leave, then they're not going to have difficulty finding another job. And businesses, vice versa, are struggling to keep workers because people are sick of getting treated like modern day slaves. So to those of y'all that are listening, now is the time to force your hand in whatever predicament you're in. If you're a low level guy in the chain of command and you feel like you deserve higher pay, now is the time where you have that leverage to maybe make a comfortable living. And if not, get your ass up and move somewhere else, or make the attempt and try to spread your wings and work for yourself. Because like I said, at the end of the day, you are the only one that's going to be willing to pay you full price for your value. If somebody else can get that shit at a discount in any way, shape, or form, they are 100% going to do that. So with that, I leave y'all until next time with these 2 questions to ask yourself. What is your value, and what do you plan on doing to obtain it? With that being said, I think that's a good place to end for this week. I plan on trying to do these weekly, potentially bi-weekly, depending on how my schedule allows. Next episode, I should be having my Uncle Dion, who's also a very talented artist in his own right, also very versatile. We're probably going to go over a little bit more on whether or not it's a good idea to be a multi-medium artist rather than sticking to one specific art form, as well as maybe even give you guys an exclusive sneak peek on the book me and him are both illustrating for my late passing grandmother. For the time being, though, for the most part, probably going to keep it on the hush just because we don't want some sleuthy asshole swiping that shit from under our noses until we pretty much have it pretty much done and published. So stay tuned for that. If you would like to find me on social media, my Instagram is at the arts by Martell 44, all one word, no caps. If for some reason you stumble upon an Instagram at the arts by Martell, all one word, no caps, I highly advise you guys not to follow that one because chances are you will get scammed by Nigerians. That is my old Instagram that has since been hacked. I have been unable to retrieve it due to Instagram's facial recognition retrieval system. So until I can either get that one removed or reclaim it, I highly advise not to go anywhere near that one. I repeat, stay far the fuck away from at the arts by Martell, all one word, no cap. This is primarily for y'all's safety. I'm relatively unfazed by it. Ecstatic even, because now I don't have to claim all my DMs from the time I was 16 to 25. So you never know what's good and what's bad. You always got to try to find the positives. Not everything is as bad as it seems. And with that, I'd like to thank y'all for tuning in. Hope y'all stayed for the entirety of the episode. For all the MMA fans out there, I plan on doing a potentially perfect picks of the week for this week's UFC event. That's Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie, so stay tuned for that. And to those that are not MMA fans, I thank again y'all for listening. And for those, health, wellness, peace. All right, you fight fuckheads, let's get down with the business. This weekend we got UFC 273, Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie. You're listening to Jordon Martell's potentially perfect picks of the week. Not but one would consider a whole lot of value for underdogs this week, but if you parlay a bunch of them together, might make a decent chunk of change. Leading off the card, you got Julio Arce taking on newcomer Daniel Gustavo Santos. Julio Arce been around for a fairly long time, a product of the first season of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Has been with the promotion for give or take 4 years now. Currently 17-5 with only two of those, my correction, being by finish. The rest have been by a split decision or majority decision. So aside from those two, you could very easily make him 19-2 or what have you. As far as the people that finished him, you had Yadong Sung, who's top 10 now, pretty much just finished Marlon Moraes by pretty ridiculous fashion. Double uppercut, really. The kid's going to be something special, undoubtedly. So that's no knock on losing to him. Aside from that, back in the day, Brian Callagher, also a UFC vet, had his number. Beat him back-to-back, won majority decision, then got him in a guillotine early in the third round. So Julio Arce, a tough motherfucker to put away all in all. Really bad matchup for a guy that's only debuting and hasn't really had a lot of experience with big promotions. He has, however, fought for some of the supplemental leagues, if you catch my drift. His only loss came in a Russian promotion, Absolute Championship Akhmat, ACA 91. A lot of the guys he's fought, fairly decent competition. Is it to the level of competition that Julio Arce is? I don't believe so. All of Julio Arce's losses have come to top flight competition. And of course, you got a new guy, Octagon Jitters player factor. You of course have the crowd to take into account this time around. So I'd look for the vet to get this one done around. Julio Arce by second round TKO stoppage. Past the 3-minute mark. Second up, we got another Contender Series vet, Pereira Rodriguez. I believe it was this past season, if I'm not mistaken. So 2001. Got picked up a unanimous decision victory. She's taking on Kayla Hansen. Kayla has been in the UFC for 3 straight fights now. Is currently 1-2 in those bouts. Fought Jin Yufei, won that by armbar. Since then, she's been on a 2-fight drought against Jasmine Jasdavizius and Corey McKenna, 2 also Contender Series prospects, very talented in their own right. But Kay trying to find her footing. She never really got that opportunity to get into the Contender Series, maybe get her feet wet, get used to the pressure of being in a big promotion like that. Kay's a 10th Planet Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner primarily, doesn't really have a whole lot to offer in the stand-up, whereas this Pereira Rodriguez has hands of fucking steel. 5 of her 7 wins are by KO. Also, you gotta figure with her being a Brazilian, a Jiu-Jitsu black belt probably comes with the citizenship. So look for Rodriguez to be able to null and void Kayla Hansen's offensive onslaught, I guess. And if Kay Hansen's not able to get Pereira Rodriguez on her back at any point during the fight, it's going to be a very short night for Kay. I see Pereira Rodriguez maybe getting a late first round KO.
Third on the night, we have Anthony Fluffy Hernandez taking on newcomer Josh Fremd. I have to give credit when credit's due, because even though I'm a huge Adolfo Vieira fan, I had the privilege of doing one of his seminars when I was at Fighting Arts Academy when I was first starting out. And I have to say, undeniably, probably one of the top 10 nicest people on the fucking planet. So to see him take this L really fucking tore me up a little bit. But Adolfo, a fucking world champ in jiu-jitsu, took the submission loss to Anthony Hernandez. I think he's only about like 26, 27. So a very high ceiling for this kid, not even really in his prime yet. Has had some pretty tough wins and pretty good victories. Beat Brendan Allen, I believe, a 5-round fight in LFA, who's caused quite a few people some problems in the UFC as a recent. Even though it got turned to a no contest, also has a win over Jordan Wright in about 40 seconds, who's also a UFC vet. His only real setbacks against a very tough Kevin Holland. Very long and rangy and tough to deal with in that division. And Fluffy is all around tough everywhere. Can stand and bang with you. Can grapple on the ground, obviously, with the Adolfo Vieira submission. As for this rookie, Josh Fremd, appears to be fairly well-rounded. I haven't really seen too much on him. Just getting out of the LFA promotion. But has 4 KO wins and 4 submission wins. So the kid can get it done, but he does have a recent KO loss against Gregory Rodriguez, who's turned out to be a fairly decent competitor. I believe he's 3-1 now. But with this one also being in front of a crowd, you got to consider that the octagon jitters might get in the way. Anthony Hernandez, more or less acclimated by now. I think this is like his 4th UFC fight. He's fought some dogs. So for that reason, I'm going to lean towards Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Probably early second round submission. Next up, you have Alexei Olenek taking on late replacement Jared Veranda, taking the place of Iyer Latifi. This is probably the best case scenario for Olenek, honestly, because this was pretty much a pink slip match for either one's job. Both guys pretty much going up and down a little bit. I think both guys were on like a 2-fight losing streak. But Latifi bought himself a couple more months on the roster, it seems. Now Jeff Aranda's kind of in that hot seat. I think he's lost 2 straight in a row. One was a split decision against Arlovsky, I want to say. And then just prior to that, he got mauled by Alexander Romanov, the undefeated, he's from the Maldives, Moldova. But Jay Veranda, known for making fights exciting. That's if he can keep the fight standing. He's tend to have difficulties doing that with guys once he's gotten to this level. Point in case with Alex Romanov. Does have quite a few finishes to his resume. I believe he's got 8. But the problem is he doesn't have that one-punch KO power that Alex Olenek has been susceptible to in past fights. Let's see, Walt Harris, Derek Lewis, Alistair Overeem. So even if Veranda's able to hurt Olenek, when Veranda rushes in to get the finish, Olenek's that crafty vet, almost has 61s to his resume, 46 by submission. He can submit you from any weird fucking position out there. A lot of guys, experienced grapplers, will fall victim to a lot of this shit. The Ezekiel choke from the bottom, the Ezekiel choke from against the cage, arm bars from top, arm bars from bottom. Olenek's an entire encyclopedia of submissions where Veranda doesn't look like he reads anything past Dr. Seuss book. So expect Olenek to get something very sneaky right out the gate pretty much. I feel like that Ezekiel choke's going to make its appearance yet again. Look to see that happen in the first round to get Olenek his 60th win. Next up, you got Mickey Gall taking on newcomer Mike Malat. You're talking about two guys that are fairly exceptional on the ground. Malat, I think, has 8 of his 7 wins by submission. I think he's out of Team Alpha Male, if I'm not mistaken. So expect to see a lot of guillotines out of this kid. So one has to figure. Fairly good as well at BJJ defense, grappling defense, all that. Which, as most fans know, is Mickey Gall's bread and butter. I want to say he's at least a brown belt under the Miller brothers. That's Dan and Jim Miller. Which sure as hell is nothing to sneeze at. But it means that this one's more or less probably going to be a stand-up war. In which case, although Mickey Gall's stand-ups drastically improved, Mike Malat does have the better stand-up. It's a matter of if the moment's going to get to him in his debut. Mickey Gall has been around the ringer quite a bit, although his talent pool for his opponents has been kind of questionable. You, of course, got CM Punk, Mike Jackson, who's technically 1-1, and his win came against CM Punk. The give or take 19-year-old Sage Northcutt, which at that time, primarily a karate guy, not phenomenal on the ground at all. A very withered and aged George Sullivan, and along with a couple other names, when he has fought guys that are pretty solid, like Mike Perry, Alex Moreno, he's struggled to solve the puzzle. However, a very large percentage of this game is mental, and Mickey Gall mentally is probably going to be more prepared than Malat. In Malat's fights on the regional scene, he has been clipped quite a few times. He has been in danger. Has he bounced back from most of those? Yes. But he is still susceptible to putting himself in bad situations. And this against guys that haven't even really touched the UFC yet. And one has to figure if Mickey Gall can survive an onslaught against Mike Perry, who's a very vicious and dangerous fucking striker. Again, similar with Alex Moreno, who's a very high volume striker, and although he won, wasn't really able to put too much of a hand on Mickey Gall. So although there's a good chance you're going to hear me bash Mickey Gall quite a bit, this is actually one I think he's going to pull through on, so I'm going to give Mickey Gall the decision victory. Following that, you have Aspen Ladd taking on Raquel Pennington. Interestingly enough, this one's actually at bantamweight. I thought it would have been at featherweight. Sort of a questionable decision on Aspen Ladd's part because she has had issues with the scales in the past, weight cutting, falling down at the scale, has missed the mark fairly frequently, which one might say that could bode for an issue for Raquel. Only thing is, when Raquel recently just fought Macy Chahazian, Macy came in almost at 150 pounds. So Raquel really no issue as far as banging with people that are much bigger than her. And Raquel very, very tough to get out of there. Has only been submitted once, and that was by Kat Zingano very early on in her career, and her only TKO loss was against, of course, Amanda Nunes. That making it all the way to the 4th round before, I want to say, Raquel gave up in her corner. But you're talking against probably the hardest hitter in that division. She's also gone to distance with some top competitors like Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, who finished Aspen Ladd actually in the opening minute of the 1st round. They always say not to do MMA math, but that might be able to tell a little bit of a story right there. Aspen Ladd really not exceptional in any one area. She's got okay striking, can finish you if you allow her. Has pretty good wrestling. I haven't seen too much of her jiu-jitsu in that area. Raquel, of course, has pretty sneaky submissions in her own right, guillotines, bulldog chokes. Not to mention Raquel's boxing against Chahazian really looked exceptional last time out. Was clipping her fairly frequently. I honestly thought she was going to get a third round TKO or something like that, the way she was hitting her. And Aspinall, whether it's mental or it is the weight cut, tends to fade as the rounds go on. Raquel tends to stay pretty neutral. If not, she gains pace as those rounds go on, so it's going to favor Raquel more as it goes on. So I'm going to give it to Raquel by third round submission. Following that, you got potential barn burner matchup. Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Marcin Tybura. Two top 10 heavyweights basically playing rock'em sock'em robots. Basically going to come down to whose chin is going to be better for this one. Rozenstruik really only been knocked out twice. Once against arguably the hardest puncher on the entire planet against Francis Ngannou. The second time came a while ago in I want to say, glory kickboxing match. Marcin Tybura, on the other hand, has been knocked out a total of 3 times. This against Augusto Sakai, Derek Lewis, and Abdurakhmanov. Since the end of 2019, though, he's been on an impressive 5-1 run. Rozenstruik been a little bit up and down since he has lost to Francis, just recently losing to Curtis Blades. And the thing about Tybura is he sneakily has a little bit of grappling in his arsenal. He has 6 wins by submission. So the fact that people overlook that, they may or may not be looking to defend a takedown. And if Tybura is able to take down Jairzinho Rozenstruik early, that could be fairly detrimental to his cardio anyway. Rozenstruik can hold the power in his hands till the late rounds, but can he hold it in his hands after he's been grappling for 2-3 strong rounds? Hasn't really shown much as far as being able to grapple with elite talent. But at the same time, one also has to take into consideration that none of Tybura's submission wins have come while he's been in the UFC. They've all been lower level promotions, M1. So one has to figure this one's probably going to stay standing, in which case you got to give it to Rozenstruik because he can take a punch better than Tybura. Not to mention he can hit a lot harder. Tybura needs a lot more punches to get the job done. So I'm going to go with the first round knockout for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Although my intuition is leaning towards the strong possibility that the grappling is going to come into play here. But again, finally answered Rozenstruik first round knockout. Next, 2 sophomore prospects and Ian Geary taking on Darian Weeks. Darian lost his debut in a late notice replacement against Brian Barberena. Got the fight on about 5 days notice and went all the way pretty much. Didn't look bad, honestly. The moment didn't get to him. He was prepared. Cardio was on point. And to get in there with a dog like Barberena, who just beat Matt Brown, who's a legend in this sport, can't help but tip the cap to him. But on the other hand, Ian Geary, very big welterweight. You want to talk about debuts, had a stellar performance against a very tough Jordan Williams. KO'd him with 1 second left in the first round. And Ian Geary's got this it factor about him. Almost like you know he's going to do big things at some point. Now, don't get me wrong, Darian Weeks, absolute junkyard dog. Will tear your head off if you're not mindful of him. As of right now, for his wins, he has a 100% finishing rate, 4 of which are by KO or TKO. And one has to take into account, Ian Geary was taking quite a few shots against Jordan Williams. Jordan arguably probably won that first round right up until the last second of it. Where the difference kind of comes into play is Darian Weeks is more of a 165er if there was a division for it. Whereas Ian Geary could arguably be like a 175er, maybe a 180 if there wasn't such a huge gap in weight difference. So one has to figure that size advantage will probably make or break the difference. Very dangerous bet if you're a gambling man to pick Ian Geary. I think he's like a minus 500 as far as a favorite. He's probably going to win. I'd say probably by second round TKO. But Darian Weeks, not somebody to be counted out, especially if Ian Geary takes him lightly.
By which way, moving on to Marco Madsen, Denmark's pride and joy, bronze medalist in the Olympics, Greco-Roman wrestling. Hasn't seemed to be able to put the entire package together when it comes to MMA yet.
Granted, still undefeated. I wouldn't have given him the win against Clay Guida the last time out. I thought Clay Guida clipped him quite a few times, dropped him, I believe, in the first round. Dropped is actually kind of a strong word. I'd say more staggered him. But Clay landed the heavier shots. He negated the grappling of Marco Madsen.
I think Pichel fairly similar as far as the styles go with Clay Guida. Only I'd say his striking is a little more polished, a little more crisp. And similar to Clay Guida in that regard, very good defense as far as grappling goes. Pichel works very good in the scramble. Has a fairly good butterfly guard if he does happen to end up on his back. But unlike Madsen, if he ends up on his back, it's not all hope is lost. If Madsen ends up in a position where he's compromised by any means, then him being such a fast twitch, explosive guy will work against him as the fight progresses. Pichel not going to win any bodybuilding contests, but he is built for cardio and built for endurance. Fights at a very relentless pace. Very good at mixing up his shots, works the body, legs, head, all pretty much equally. He put a lot of that variation together in his win against Austin Hubbard. And Madsen, not a huge guy. I feel like he might be able to push 145 if his weight cut allows it. And Pichel, again, one of those guys that could potentially be a 165er if their weight class was available. So I like Vink Pichel in this one. I say it probably winds up being a late second round TKO. As for the main card, you got Mackenzie Dern taking on Tecia Torres. It's intriguing in the sense that Tecia Torres never been submitted. All her losses are by decision, but never really fought the caliber of grappler that Mackenzie Dern is. Mackenzie Dern, a world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, literally doing Jiu-Jitsu before she could walk. Much improved in the stand-up. Has been working pretty extensively with one of my dad's close friends in Costa Mesa, Jason Perillo, who is a phenomenal boxing coach. I believe was undefeated as a professional until he got a detached retina and was forced to pretty much retire, otherwise go blind. Is also known for training Michael Bisping, who is the middleweight champ, as well as Marlon Chito Vera, who very well could be fighting for the bantamweight title fairly soon. Not to mention arguably the baddest female fighter on the planet, Chris Cyborg. So when you talk about iron sharpening iron, you really couldn't have a better stable of fighters to help sharpen your tools. Tecia very tough to pin down though, very agile, can move in and out with relative ease. I'm on the bet in the striking exchanges. Mackenzie Dern's going to be about a half a step behind Tecia the entire time. But once they do engage in close quarters, even getting Tecia on the fence, I think it might be a wrap for her. Because although Ticia's faced top flight competition, none of them really grapplers. The losses came against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang, Rose Namajunas, all strawweight world champs, but none of them exceptional submission artists. So I think Tecia thinks she can hang with her in that department until it actually comes down to that moment and actually having to do it. I think she's going to realize that there's levels to this shit, so I'm going to give it to Mackenzie Dern by first round submission. As for the main attractions of Saturday, the triple header they got going on, you got the title eliminator and Khamzat Chimaev taking on Gilbert Burns. I have to figure if there's any champs sweating their strap right now, it has to be Kamaru Usman because he wants no part of Khamzat Chimaev right now. Why do you think he trained with Gilbert Burns this entire camp? Because he wants to ensure that Khamzat doesn't face him for the title, because that puts him at risk for potentially not being the greatest welterweight of all time. And I have to tell you, that's at severe danger right now, because the way Khamzat handled Li Zhangliang, who's a top 15 prospect, literally clowned him, taking him down, picking him up, slamming him wherever he fucking wanted to, literally talking to Dana White on the outside. Lee didn't even land one fucking punch the entire time. Now, I don't think Gilbert's going to get clowned by him. I think he's going to at least lay a couple paws on him. Hamzat's coach said that if he could submit Gilbert Burns, he'd get his purple belt. I'm not sure if I see that happening. I see it occurring more like the Gerald Mershard fight where they meet in the middle, maybe exchange a little bit. But all in all, I see Gilbert getting fed a fistful of NyQuil. Gilbert's fought as low as 155, to which he lost to Dan Hooker. In the final exchange of that fight, they both landed on each other's chin. Dan Hooker's was a little bit more powerful. Not to mention when Gilbert fought Usman for the title, Gilbert got cracked and dropped a couple times in that fight, if I'm not mistaken. Hamzat never even really been in a bad predicament yet. It's tough to say, of course, when a guy has only been hit one time in 4 or 5 fights. But Hamzat's a special fucking talent, and not to mention he's steamrolled guys out welterweight and literally gone up 15 pounds and steamrolled guys there. So with this fight, I really don't think Gilbert knows what he's getting into. You even saw when they kind of sized each other up in the sauna. Hamzat way bigger, and they're going to swell up after the weigh-ins. I see this one not lasting very long. I like the under for this one. I think it's going to be a fairly short night for Gilbert and Hamzat. Hamzat's going to win by first round KO in 2 minutes in the first round. As for your co-main, this being for the bantamweight title of the world, you got the rematch between Aljamain Sterling taking on Peter Yan. Now I must say it would be careless for me not to, before giving you my not so expert opinion, I must bring to the attention of the people that may potentially be betting on this that it looks like Aljamain Sterling may have been listening to Biggie Smalls this entire training camp. My man was showing his physique on Instagram and saying, "Give me the juice." So before motherfuckers start connecting the dots, being like, Piotr Yan was absolutely murdering Aljo the entire first fight before he did some stupid shit. So there's no chance in hell that Piotr's going to lose this one. Don't be so sure on that. Because you don't think Aljo knows that he was pretty much outclassed that entire fight? Of course he does. And does he want to be illegitimized as a champ because he won it by disqualification? So I wouldn't be so sure that Aljo didn't try a couple extra vitamins to maybe give him the upper edge. For all we know, that might have been the quote-unquote injury that kept him out for the duration of time between that and I think sometime last year where they were supposed to fight again. Potentially, maybe he had to wait to make sure his levels subsided. Who knows? All I'm saying is don't be so sure that this is going to be the same exact fight. Because whether or not Aljo's bulking is legal or illegal, the fact of the matter is he's a much bigger fighter than he was last time. He has a substantial grappling advantage if he can get him on the ground. Aljo has been training extensively with Adrian Yanez, an up-and-coming prospect in that division who has hands of fucking steel in his own right. So good chance in between then and now that Aljo's striking has substantially improved. And one also has to consider the fact that Piotr had some visa issues, especially with his coaches. He's making a drastic switch in corners, going with Habib and I believe Sean O'Malley. There is a language barrier between him and Sean O'Malley too as well. So one, or if the grappling exchanges do happen, the expertise in getting out of those positions might not be there when he needs them. Because yes, Habib's a great grappler, but he's never really been in positions where he's uncomfortable. So is he going to know the escape to a back take necessarily? Potentially not, because he's been so dominant. Not to mention because Piotr Yan was so dominant in the first matchup that he's really not going to make any adjustments as far as changing his game up any. Aljo is going to do that. He's going to make the adjustments where needed. It's not going to be the same exact fight. He's going to take a different approach, a different game plan, now that he has a feel for Piotr in that situation. So I actually have a fairly unpopular opinion on this one. I'm going to go with the upset. Don't say I didn't tell you so. I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling by 4th round submission. And I'll even go a step further saying that win, lose, or draw, Aljamain Sterling's probably going to fight TJ Dillashaw next. Because if he wins and he was on the supplements, then now you got the two cheaters going at it because Aljamain probably is going to get stripped of the belt. If he loses it, Dillashaw's probably going to fight him
And if he wins that, move on to fight Piotr for the title. But hey, we'll see what happens. And last but certainly not least, you got the main attraction of the night. Although if you ask me, sort of anticlimactic if you think about it, because you got the heavy favorite in Alexander Volkanovski taking on sort of an up and down Korean zombie, Chan Sung Jung. He did just win his last bout against Dan Ige, but just prior to that, he got completely outclassed by Brian Ortega, who just lost to Volkanovski in a fucking barn burner. So although they say not to do MMA math, but when you got one guy that completely outclassed the other and Brian Ortega outclassing Chan Sung Jung, then he moves on to fight the champion. Both guys gave it their absolute fucking 100% effort. Literally pulled every single trick out of either guy's toolbox. Brian damn near finished the fight, give or take 3 or 4 times with a submission. And let me tell you something, if Brian Ortega is unable to finish you with the amount of fucking output that he had as far as submission attempts, then Alexander Volkanovski is not tapping. You can throw that fucking twister out the goddamn window. Chan Sung Jung probably won't even get him in that situation because Volkanovski, a former 185-pound rugby player, used to competing with guys way, way bigger than him. Out of 23 fights, has only lost one of them, that being by decision. So Chin's still pretty much intact, hasn't really been rocked, hasn't really been hurt, which is really the zombie's only path to victory in this one, I feel. Now, does the zombie have the power to do it? 100%, absolutely. There's a good chance that the people that are betting on Alex Volkanovski are probably going to be sweating their money the entire 25 minutes through, because the zombie does not go away for shit. He himself has never been submitted and probably not going to, because what people don't know is that jiu-jitsu actually started over in Asia, in Japan, and in Korea. So a lot of the time, their black belts are just as good as the black belts in Brazil. Koreans tend to not get the credit on the ground that they typically should. So look to see this probably be a 5-round stand-up fight, which is a beautiful thing to fucking see. Both guys are probably gonna get fight of the night. I quite honestly don't see a finish happening in this fight. So look to probably see it go the full 5 rounds. If not, maybe see Volkanovski get a late 3rd round, 4th round TKO. It's more or less going to come down to who wants it more and which person winds up quitting before the other. And Volkanovski proved that in the Brian Ortega fight, that he's willing to pretty much go out in his shield. If you're going to be the champ, you got to beat the champ. Korean Zombie's going to have to beat the champ pretty much by KO, and I don't see that happening. So look to see a fight of the night out of these two motherfuckers. Probably going to go the distance, but I see Volkanovski edging it out. Well, maybe not edging it out. I see him probably getting 4 rounds to 1. But still, going to be a damn good fight. But with that, I officially bring the 2nd episode of the Martell Effect to a close. Thank y'all so much for listening. Happy I was finally able to get this off for you guys. It's been a hot minute, about a year-long hiatus, but I'm looking to get back and do these a lot more consistently. Like I said, I'm probably going to have my uncle on next. If not, maybe I'll sneak another one just by myself in between that time, just so you guys got a little more content to indulge in. As for my degenerate fight fans out there, may